to us, a bold, confident, hard-working, result-driven, decisive, grassroots mobilizer, charismatic, patriotic, and demonstrable, incorruptible person. He's a leader with a clear track record of achievement, and he shares Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia's vision of bold solution for our country. He complements our flag bearer in many significant ways, and the two enjoy a warm, personal relationship anchored in deep mutual respect. More importantly, Dr. Opoku Prempeh has a great working relationship with our presidential candidate, His Excellency Dr. Alhaji Muhammadu Bawumia. The synergy between these two great leaders on our presidential ticket, coupled with their proven track record and transformational campaign message, will help the new Patriotic Party to secure a resounding third conservative electoral victory on December 7, 2024.
So there you have it, Justin Frimpong Kodia, who is the General Secretary of the New Patriotic Party, announcing what was expected. As a matter of fact, if there was going to be any other name, that would have been the news and a big surprise. But over the last 1 month at least, there was some confirmation, or there were various levels of confirmation about Dr. Opoku Prempeh being the obvious choice for the running mate for Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia going into election 2024, the presidential election. The National Steering Committee of the party, the National Executive Committee, the National Council sat Thursday, and all those layers approved him as the right man to help the NPP break the 8, and then also ensure that they have the third successive electoral victory. And that's the objective of the party. Now, the conversation is whether, first of all, this would achieve that objective, number one. Two, the NDC's direct response, because the likes of Dr. Gideon Boakon have thrown the challenge. If there's going to be any conversation about Dr. Opoku Prempeh, it should be about the competence and the achievement between himself and Professor Nana Jane Opoku Agyeman, because they have both served in the education ministry, at the least, as well. But Malik Basintale is Deputy National Communications Officer for the NDC. He's a member of the NDC campaign team, for John Mahama's campaign team. I thank you so much, Malik, for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Alfred.
Also,
good to be here.
Great. Also joining us is the lead pollster and Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, Musa Dankwa. Mr. Dankwa, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Alfred.
It's good to have you. And you are here for good reason, because of the poll that you put out this week. And that is also generating some conversation. I'll be joined by Professor Samuel Edujemfi, who is a associate professor of political science at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology here at UST as well. But first off, let me start off with you. Malik, finally, the NPP's ticket for the presidential race is set. Dr. Opoku Prempeh, as widely expected. It was as a matter of when he was going to be approved officially, and not if. This ticket, does this worry you, the NDC? Certainly gives you something to think about, does it not?
Well, Alfred, good morning to you. Good morning to my seniors on the panel. And good morning to all our cherished viewers. Like you said, it was a matter of when it was going to be announced, and not if it was going to be announced. Because obviously we all knew that the choice of a running mate was centered around Napo. No matter what other members, including members of the NPP, said, and no matter the advices they gave to the party, virtually we all knew that they were not going to listen, because there was a grand agenda to select Napo, and it was already done, as even stated by campaign team members of Bawumia. They said Bawumia knew who his running mate was going to be even before he became vice president. And so there was a long-standing agenda. I listened to high-ranking people in the MPP, like Mr. Apia Kubi, rightly given his position on the matter.
But what he has stated, that a decision has been made.
Yes, but he gave his position on the matter, and he said, look, this man cannot bridge the gap between the parliamentary caucus and the executive. This man is not virtually fit to be a running mate in this country, and then shared his very candid opinion on the matter. I have listened to neutrals speak on this particular matter, and lots of people have shared their sentiments, across board. First of all, let me say that we in the NDC, politically, and let me use that word, welcome this decision. If you are going into a race with your opponent, you obviously want them to feature very weak strikers. At least that makes
see this choice of
your work
as a
bit easy. I would explain that. You see, so we welcome the decision. We are happy that they've made our work a step easier, not entirely easy, because of course we in the NDC do not see this election, and I've never seen any election as a walkover. The will of the people must be sought. The will of the people must be protected, and the will of the people must reflect on the election day, and that can only be done by political vigilance and extra work being done by the political party. So let me say that, yes, we see this as a step further in making the elections easy, but we still and will not see any elections as a mere walkover. Now I listen to Dr. Gideon Boako say that we should focus on the competencies of NAPO and leave out all other matters. Alfred, if you take the Constitution, there's a basic criteria to who becomes a president in this country, among which is that the president must be of sound mind. That has got nothing to do with the competence of a president, and has got nothing to do with whether the person is a professor, the person is a doctor, the person is a lawyer, or whatsoever. You basically must be of sound mind. Your composure, your conduct, your personality, all comes into play. And the Ghanaian people will obviously look out for one person who is easily approachable and who they can call, not just a vice president, but a brother, a father, and a godfather, and an advisor. So that when you have challenges, you can simply approach that person. Fortunately, the choice of NAPO will be different from how it was done in the choice of Bawumia in 2016. At least with Bawumia,
you mean in
we didn't have in 2008, I beg your pardon. And fast forward to 2016, because there was a new appointment, which obviously still maintained, Bawumia. There was very little history to who Bawumia was. And all we knew was that he had worked at the Bank of Ghana. If you listen to President Akufo-Addo at the time, he kept saying that the man had worked at the Bank of Ghana. The man had the solutions to our economic woes in this country. The man was brought on board because he was an economic, in the words of Akufo-Addo, messiah, and an economic wizard, and was going to help transform the economy by being the head of the how do you call them? The head of the economic management team. Nana-Addo stipulated this. He went in everywhere saying this, and then told the Ghanaian people why Dr. Bawumia was brought on board. Because there was very little history to who the person of Dr. Bawumia was. Anything he said, politically, anything he said was taken to be, something that was the truth in the eyes of well-meaning Ghanaians. I remember when he was promising 1 village, 1 dam, $1 million per constituency, would arrest the dollar in the first 100 days. I remember many people struggled to know the kind of person, the kind of character Dr. Bawumia was. And as such, the people went and gave him the nod. Today, obviously, would agree at an undeniable conclusion today on this panel that Dr. Bawumia has been a disaster, he's been a flop, and he's led the economy nowhere.
How do you relate that
with
to what's
NAPO,
happening?
like I said, there's history to him. At least, if not for nothing at all, he's headed 2 ministries. And in the words of Gideon Boako, we will not leave out the use of his competences in judging his person as a running mate. One, Napo has been at the education ministry. For the first time in the history of this country, senior high school went into a 3-shift system. I remember when Professor Nana Jane, took a bold decision of eradicating schools that were even doing 2 shifts. If you remember at the time, the last school to have been eradicated under Professor Nana Jane was Tishugu Anglican. They used to go morning and afternoon. She decided that no, that was a cake to our educational corridors. So we needed to do away with that system. She fought so hard. We built E-blocks, we built more schools, we built more junior high schools, eradicated over 100 schools under trees, and the shift system was brought to an end. The NDC actually celebrated this achievement, and all other African countries took a cue from it. Napo came on board, introduced this archaic system. I remember the first time my junior sister vacated from school and came home, Alfred. I kept asking her, when are you resuming? She said, we don't know. When are you resuming? We don't know. She vacated in January and went back to school in August. This is someone who was supposed to be in school all through these years. And in fact, they had confessed themselves, the NPP, that it was a temporary system they know, that it was a system...
But then again, that's why I'll come into that. If you did know that it was a temporary situation to address
like I said,
a particular problem, that infrastructure development was going to be the next phase of phasing out that three-tier system that you talk about. Why then do you say that that's a failure if you agree that that was a temporary situation, a temporary intervention to address a problem?
It was addressing a problem that we had solved as a result of the construction of new senior high schools. We didn't construct the schools for, people, non-students to go and occupy. We constructed them for students, and these schools were available. I remember the time the 3-shift system had commenced. We still had senior high schools which had not been opened. You remember the issue of the Aflao chief, when he was begging that they should open an E-block at Aflao, which was completed. What did your president tell him? He insulted him and told him that if he wanted
there were concerns about some of the schools.
So the point I'm making is that the issue of access,
those schools were far away from the communities.
Look, that is neither here nor there.
That was a concern.
It cannot be a concern.
And that you were saying you're going to buy buses and to transport them and so on.
Everything was done. Everything was done in these schools. And if you remember, when the chief was pleading on Nanado to open, he said the school was just at his backyard. Yet they refused to open it. So the issue of access could not have been resolved with a 3-shift system. The issue of access would have been resolved by pragmatic steps that were taken by President Mahama, which obviously they simply ought to have implemented, and that was opening these schools. The second point was, for the first time, a quota system was introduced to our teacher training institutions. I remember that TATCO in past, before Opoku Prempeh became education minister, used to take about 800 students at a go. As a result of bad policies by Opoku Prempeh, a quota system was introduced where today TATCO, BATCO, and all other teacher training systems have been slashed. They have slashed their intake down by more than 0.5%. Today you go to BATCO and they recruit just about 300 students. You go to TATCO, Tamale teacher training, they recruit just about 400. Many people have been disenfranchised, all as a result of the bad policies that were instituted by NAPO and a harsh quota system reintroduced into our educational curriculum again. Again, if you remember, at the time they were campaigning to come into office, Napo was one of the people who kept on saying that, look, we will pay the teacher trainee allowance, we would restore the nursing trainee allowance, and then we would ensure that all these persons are paid. At least, if for nothing at all, the students themselves have been speaking. My sister went to teacher trainee college. For the entire period in the school, she never received alawa for a single day. And today you can open your phone lines to teacher trainees. Yes. My sister, yes, 3 years in Baga Training College. She knows what?
Which training?
Baga Training College in Tamale. You can cross-check. Hey. She has never received alawa for a single day. And you can open your phone lines to teacher trainees. In other words,
your sister was there.
Yes, they have even been asked to pay a little sum in addition to their fees, so it caters for the food they eat. Because government does no longer release funds for them to be fed in schools. You know, teacher trainees go to the dining hall. They don't. So their fees have been compounded, yet no allowing all these institutions.
No, again, what was your solution for that?
For which one?
Teacher training allowances.
I mean, we brought in a big student loan trust fund. If you remember, students could get easy access to these loans. I mean, with very little interest rates. After it was restored before we left office. If you remember, Nanado, if you remember, because for obvious reasons,
you cancelled it.
The reason was to expand the intake of which we did. The reason was to ensure that they get access to the student loan trust fund. And after there was a little backlash, if you remember, Nanado told us that because they agitated, we restored it. And so before 2016, we started paying again.
Well, that not
they
for
came into office
reasons,
and they decided,
but that was the fact.
But if you remember, again, when these teachers were out there crying and what have you, Mr. Opoku Prempeh, sadly and arrogantly, came out to tell them that, look, students who even enroll in diploma education do so with very bad results. And that is how come they end up in diploma institutions. I've been thinking about this statement. And all I keep asking myself is, how will Opoku Prempeh approach diploma students again? Look, I know people who are PhD students today who started with diploma certificates. It wasn't because they were dunderheads. It was simply because a lot of them could not even get money to finance their education. So they ought to undertake a diploma education, start working, get some salary, and then be able to, progress in the educational corridor. A lot of PhD holders today, they commenced. My father was a teacher till he rose to being an assistant headmaster. My father was a diploma student, not because he was a dunderhead. It was simply because at the time, he was from a village in Boko called Binduri, and all they did was farming. And you could not use farm, inputs to feed the house and pay your fees. So he ought to go to the teacher trainee with a diploma certificate, start working after being a teacher, and then progress in his educational curriculum. And he did so rightly. Look, Napo simply, arrogantly, and ignorantly thought that anyone who had enrolled into a diploma institution did so because he had bad grades. Please, Mr. Opoku Prempeh, it is not so. Go back and check the radar and understand that people don't do so because they have bad certificates. There are so many other reasons to that. Then, Alfred, we come to his days of being an energy minister.
Well,
I want to fast forward.
But you know what's interesting? You fast forward. But
right.
I recall that when, I think sometime in July 2020, when Professor Nana Opoku was first named as your running mate going into that election, the MPP also outlined a number of things. And that's why that call by Dr. Gideon Bako to have the performance of these two side by side in that same education ministry perused and analyzed is one that you, the NDC, will also have to look at going forward. That press conference was addressed by, at the time, Bawumia Samoa. He was still, Nana, at the time, you hadn't resigned from, he was still a member of the MPP. That press conference, I recall, apart from the fact that Professor Jenan Opoku candidature fulfilled the feminine expectation, as it were, advancing females or the female involvement in Ghana politics. That's the only thing the MPP acknowledged. And they outlined some of the issues that they think that were failures. You see, in the ministry when she was a minister. The fact that during her tenure as education minister, trainee teachers' allowances were scrapped, even against appeals to reconsider the decision, adding that, quote, it was one of the things she was proud to have done. 2, Yabwabin talks about, at the time, Professor Jenan Opoku hadn't, they say, anti-feminist posturing, issues of corruption that they talk about, presided over the heightening corrupt practices at the National Service Secretariat, the Secretariat under her direct supervision of the Ministry of Education, and then also the famous that statement that was made about chalk, the chalks. You see, and by this was by then the second lady, Mrs. Emisata. And at the time, she was the Minister of Education.
Alfred,
you cannot gloss over all of that and say, okay, well, all is well. And that Professor Nana Jane Opoku did excellently well. And Napo did not do anything at all.
Don't stress yourself with these long conversations. The MPP will only think that Professor Nana Jane, of course, which we will boldly accept, that she promotes the cause of, the feminine agenda in this country. We accept that, yes, she promotes that cause. But you see, they don't know how polytechnics became university. They don't know how teacher trainee colleges were upgraded to a tertiary status in this country. They don't know. They came to meet it. So they thought it was child's play. And because the MPP are simply not achievers, they don't understand how these policies have transformed the economic or educational fortunes of this country. They don't know how BEC finally went private. It was as a result of the good leadership of Professor Jenan Opoku Prempeh. In fact, the e-blogs today that they have students attended was a concept of Professor Jenan Opoku Prempeh. And so they don't know these basic achievements. And they don't know how they came about. And because there are no achievements, they don't see any glory to that. But you see, surprisingly, they quickly go in to speak of corruption. I think they are misconstruing who procured assets at 75 cedis, okay, under the leadership of Opoku Prempeh. And maybe they think it was under the leadership of Professor Jenan Opoku Prempeh. It was Opoku Prempeh's regime where assets were ballooned from 15 cedis in the market to 75 Ghana cedis.
Was it just
at the sole source?
It wasn't the type of assets that you know.
Please.
You know about this.
We saw the assets. I mean, we saw them. They brought them to Parliament. When Parliament questioned him as to why he took that decision, he said it was an emergency. And I mean, that was virtually why they needed to sign a sole source contract in procuring assets. Look, me sitting here, I can procure assets for government. There's no national security basis to why assets, the procurement of assets must be sole sourced. Yet it was sole sourced to blue class. And this was under the leadership of Opoku Prempeh. And so if you speak about a corrupt person, then you should rather channel your arsenals to Opoku Prempeh. I wanted to fast forward to the energy sector. I'm told that Opoku Prempeh was chosen because one of the reasons is because he was from the Ashanti region. His overlord, the Otunfo, or say to
Malik, let's put it in context. The mathematical sets that you talk about, those are scientific math sets.
Okay.
So
that's the SMI, the scientific mathematical instruments at the time, which was, according to the ministry, meant to help eliminate examination malpractice.
But why so saucy?
They
said, Gabby said so saucy is thievery.
Absolutely.
That's what they said.
One of the issues that came up was
thievery.
the cost of 75.
We are speaking about the sole source.
Also, yes.
When you read the Procurement Act, usually this is not one of the grounds, because just supplying mass set, what is so peculiar about it? Is it just one company? So why do you, and it's not like the Ghanaian entity is the manufacturer.
This was procured by Bluegrass Group Limited.
Yes. So just procuring, you are buying from outside. What makes it so sourcing?
I mean,
so especially as in opposition, they were crying from the rooftop, so sourcing is thievery, and then they come and they're doing it worse. So he can't run away from this.
Even when he was questioned, and today, are you aware that the Ministry of Education remains the only contract dealing with so-called the blue class you are talking about? To date, the only client of Blue Class Group is the Ministry of Education, and the only contract they ever executed was the mathematical sets contract. So it was simply brought on board to siphon the people of this country. And at the time, let me remind you, Alfred, at the time, we went to the market and we asked of the price. I remember that Dr. Apak brought a sample. Yes, Dr. Apak brought a sample of what they said they had procured for 75 cedis. He bought it at 15 Ghana cedis from the market.
Same content,
same everything,
and same functionality.
Absolutely. Even the one who procured them was arrested. If you remember, he was picked up by the BNI. Because the BNI officers were surprised that, look, mass said you say 75 cedis. And this was under the leadership of Opoku Prempeh. Then if he becomes vice president, even toothbrushes for senior high school students will be bought at 200 Ghana cedis. Anyway, when he became energy minister, his own chief, Otunfo Osei-Tutu II, lamented how the bad policies and the bad management practice of NAPO had led to his appliances being damaged on a daily basis as a result of load shedding. If you remember, Otunfo was in tears. He virtually cried out to him. And he said, Mr. Napo, go and manage your ministry well. There is doomsday in the morning, there is doomsday in the afternoon. All my home appliances are getting destroyed. When Napo came back to Accra, and you journalists pleaded on him to at least give us a doomsday timetable so that we could prepare well and always put our gadgets off. He looked in the faces of all of us. With no respect to Otunfo, with no respect to the Ghanaian people, with no respect to you journalists, and told you that if we had the effrontery, we should draw our timetable and publish it. arrogance.
Well,
in the man,
says that was a direct response to you, the NDC, because you were doing politics with that erratic power supply within.
Oh, so Otunfo did politics with it. So Otunfo did politics with it.
And I'm just saying, is that 3 to 4 month period of the erratic power supply, they say, cannot be compared to the 4 years of the doomsday that we had when you were in power.
If Napo says that Otunfo's cry was a cry of the NDC, and by so doing, maybe if he was responding to the NDC, Otunfo is NDC, no problem. But Otunfo cried out, and Otunfo lamented his gadgets being destroyed. In fact, there was a vigil in Ashanti region over Dumso, and Napo added all of us, lumped all of us together, chiefs, elders, statesmen, and told us to draw our timetable. This was gross disrespect. And in fact, for the first time, I thought that the Ashanti Kingdom would have summoned him for that level of gross disrespect. Again, if you remember, under same Matthew Opoku Prempeh, they had claimed that they had a Wi-Fi deal, of which again was sole sourced. And the Wi-Fi deal was sole sourced, to quote the exact figures, at a whooping 84.4 million Ghana cedis. Till date, are you aware that we pay a whooping 11.4 million Ghana cedis for no Wi-Fi in institutions? Senior high schools were interviewed. Do you remember the Wi-Fi deal? Manasseh did the expose. It was under his leadership.
Yeah, that week, too many scandals happened, so we couldn't discuss it.
We'll be back to it. It was under the leadership of Napo, where the state has been siphoned. No senior high school in this country has Wi-Fi. You can go to Ganasco, Tamasco, Prempeh College, of which you completed, does not get access to this Wi-Fi. Yet every month we pay 11.4 million Ghana cedis. So we know the character of the man Napo.
If you say
we know his
senior high school has
incompetence.
received their Wi-Fi,
there was an Alfred, let me tell you.
I just wanted to put on.
That's right.
If you say no senior high school has been installed with Wi-Fi, that's not true.
To my knowledge.
That's not true.
To my knowledge.
I'm going to give you details of the Africa Education Watch, their own research.
So go into it.
That specifically details the number of senior high schools that, based on their own
research. That's right. So go in it.
Senior high schools, they have the Wi-Fi installed. Some of them are not functioning to the expected capacity. Others are functioning but at half capacity, and so on. But to say that no Wi-Fi has been installed
so this is the point.
Senior high school is not true.
This is the point.
It's not true.
Per the contract that was brought to Parliament, and per the definition of Wi-Fi supplies to senior high schools, no senior high schools has received what was promised them by NAPO. That's the point I was making. And you have admitted that in the Africa Watch report, they say some have non-functioning Wi-Fi facilities, some are functioning at half rates. They should give me a school that is functioning at full rate. That's the point I'm making. We pay 11.4 million Ghana cedis every month as a result of these Wi-Fi supplies. And nothing is being done. That is the point I'm making. And so, if we look at the competencies of NAPO, it is entirely zero, because during his tenure, nothing substantial was done in the corridors of this country, be it education, be it health. His demeanor, his character, he's full of pride, he's full of opulence, he's full of arrogance, and on a number of occasions, he has disrespected well-meaning Ghanaians. If you remember the issue where senior high school students were pleading on him to give them toilet facilities, remember? He told them to go out there and use polybags. And then he said at least they had polybags and what have you. Very arrogant. Looked at young children who were struggling. And you see, Alfred, I'll land on this. Aside all these competencies and all these character traits he does not fit into, I have said that the running mate serves as a balance to you, the flag bearer. So as a flag bearer, I'll land on this. As a flag bearer, you need to look out for your shortfalls, and you need to see who best fits it. We all know that Dr. Bawumia
in fact, I was going to, because I'll come to on that complementary role. And that's where I bring in Musa Danko as well, because of that point you made about the complementary role. Normally, I
was going to explain that before he comes
to and I'll come to you on that. Zadakwa, you would have the running mate coming in to, as it were, play that complementary role for the flag bearer, and not necessarily have a very functional role of galvanizing a base. But would you agree that Dr. Opoku Prempeh's choice primarily was to galvanize the base of the NPP's stronghold, the World Bank, the Ashanti region? That was the main objective.
Hi, Alfred. Thank you very much. I think if you speak to political analysts and people who understand the data and who know NAPO over the years, it is obvious and it's very clear. And I think on this network, Mr. Honorable Aikwe Otu said it, that it is simply to energize the base. And it's a trade-off they have kind of come to agreement to, that we are bleeding in the floating voters, we are bleeding in the base. Which of these two are the most important thing for us as a party to first hold us together? Because if your base crashes, I think you're going to be in a very, very difficult situation. And indeed, if you compare what is happening in the UK elections, the collapse of the Conservatives was what delivered Labour the landslide. Not because Labour had more popular support than Conservatives. So they think that let's hold the base together. Let's keep the base together. And more importantly, the base in the Ashanti region. The theory has been that if we win 80% of Ashanti region and we're able to hold on to our performance in other regions, we could win the elections in 2024 or break the 8. So for them, it is very important that they try and hold on to Ashanti region and maybe by extension, other MPPs across the country. So clearly, there's no doubt that that was the reason behind the decision that was taken to appoint NAPO. Because normally when you are appointing a running mate, you look at the person that is able to appeal across or beyond your base. And I think they've realized that the candidate they have now is unable to do that within the base. The base is now fractured, fragmented. So who else can we bring on board to ensure that we can organize and mobilize the base to keep or to give us a better chance of breaking the 8? Because if you look at what we've seen in the polling numbers, there are people who could have given them a good run for their money, a good chance of becoming highly competitive than what NAPO has given them. But probably those guys were ruled out because they weren't seen to be the base people. And indeed, work that we're currently doing in Ashanti region, some part of Accra, will come out Monday. We will see how the country kind of hold different view about NAPO in Ashanti region and even outside the greater Kumasi area, and indeed in some big areas of Accra where MBP is very strong at. But clearly, this was to energize the base. And people like Educhum, who could have given them a mileage outside the base, were probably not selected. And then,
if you say that Dr. Yause Educhum would have given the MBP a mileage outside of the base.
Absolutely. What I'm saying is that, look, we have seen MPP struggle within the floating voters bloc. And that problem persists up to date. And if you look at Educhum, he would have come with some strong qualities. I didn't want to speak on this issue before the nomination because I don't want to be seen to be those who are promoting candidates. So I kept quiet on this. But for what we have seen in the data over the last 24 months, clearly MPP had an issue with floating voters. They are hemorrhaging among floating voters.
Right.
They are hemorrhaging across the evangelical voters strongly. And more importantly, among the Pentecostal and the charismatic churches. The numbers are not very good. So Educhim would have given them an opportunity to calm the fears of the evangelical voters. Now, this person is one of our own. And it's a character that I think it doesn't create a bit of friction among the floating voters. So he would have been able to go outside the Ashanti region and say, look, give us a chance. This is what we want to do. Look at me and give us the vote. He would have been able to appeal to people outside Ashanti region. And then if you have a candidate that is strong in the base, then you wouldn't have to worry about appeasing your base using the running mate. What we have seen is that Bawumia is not strong in the base, so they can't use him to galvanize the base. Then who else can we bring? Obviously, mathematically, the answer is NAPO from that score. And that's the only reason why I think the reason why they went for NAPO and ignored others that could have appealed to people outside the region.
I see, but then again, are you saying that Dr. Opoku Prempeh doesn't have the capacity to go beyond just the base to be able to attract the floating voters?
I don't want to leak figures right now, but on Monday, I think from Monday, we'll see the figures. We'll see how the Ashanti region sees NAPO in terms of favorability. We will see how the people in Greater Accra see NAPO as part within the rhythm of favorability. We can see even within the MPP how it's perceived, within NDC how it's perceived, and within the floating voters how it's perceived. That will give you an indication of what might happen down the line, unless they are able to repackage him, sell him in a way that people will forget about, you know, the options that could have been given to them, and then maybe turn the race into a different kind of race. But for now, my initial view is that it is just for the base, and I think I'm not the only one saying this.
And talk about repackaging. As in what? Because I know that this tag of arrogance, whether true or otherwise, he's not the only one who has had to deal with this. In fact, the president, if you recall, from 2008, had to deal with this tag of arrogance for 3 electoral cycles. Before, I mean, at some point, he said, because they had gotten to a point where that tag of arrogance had stuck so much, he had to now come to the point of continuously begging so that will be addressed. What kind of repackaging are you talking about?
Look, people like Professor Mensah at the University of Ghana are expert in packaging in communication. But I think what NAPO has to do, which the time is not on his side, it took how many elections for people to accept that, oh, it's not that kind of branding or description they give him. As to whether NAPO can do that between now and December is a very question mark. But if you look at the recent history and his reaction to the Dumsa issue, that has not cast him well in the eyes of voters. That is something he has to really, really fight. Now, as to whether he do it in a very, what should I say, in a very nice way, like maybe regretting the incident and accepting the fact that he could have said something better than what he said. I think sometimes the people feel that telling the truth in politics is not good. But sometimes when you admit your mistakes and you apologize, people are able to forgive you and move forward. But if you want to defend the situation, then it really makes people angry. So they have to package him. And I think also they have to keep him on script, as I've heard this morning. He must focus on what he's being asked to do. My issue is, would they be able to take him outside the Ashanti region? Or is he going to focus his campaign in the Ashanti region? Would they deploy him in Accra? No. Deploy him in the Bono region? I mean, those are serious questions. Serious questions that they have to ask. And I think if we are saying that he was selected for the base, they were more keenly willing to keep the Ashanti base than any other base sitting in any other region. So probably they know the numbers in the Ashanti region. Once Ashanti region comes through, the rest can be dealt with. But I think they should have done, I don't know, they should have used data really to inform this decision. And as to whether data was used, I really can't tell.
Well, listening to the General Secretary, they're very clear in their minds. Data was used, well, based on what he said.
But it depends on what we're looking at in the data.
Well, they're convinced this is the man to help them break the edge.
No, if that's what I'm saying, that if the key objective was to galvanize the base, absolutely any poll within MPP will put him on top of that.
Including the supposed National Intelligence Bureau?
No doubt. But this election is not about MPP's base. It's a general election where every Tom, Dick, and Harry will be given a chance to vote. So you must look beyond your party base. But as I said, they are in a very unique situation. The flag bearer, for the first time in the history of our politics, is not able to galvanize his own base. And that is the difference we are seeing now. This is not a normal election that we have.
Wow.
Well,